These 10 countries could destroy the US if they walk away. Predictions for 2025. They call the US unstoppable, a modern empire fueled by global power. But what if that empire is more fragile than it looks? What if its survival depends not just on military might or technology, but on the quiet cooperation of 10 crucial nations? Imagine this. One country builds the chips in your phone, another holds trillions in US debt. Some protect American soldiers abroad, others keep the oil flowing to your car. In a world more connected and more divided than ever, these relationships are not just diplomatic handshakes. They're pressure points. And if these countries step back in 2025, the ripple effects could shake the foundation of everyday life, from the markets to your morning coffee. At the Journey of Wisdom, we don't just chase headlines. We explore deeper truths behind global events and how they shape the world we live in. So let's uncover the 10 nations that hold America's future in their hands and why walking away could change everything. Number 1. Turkey. An often overlooked yet critically positioned, Turkey is one of the most strategically influential countries in the modern geopolitical landscape, and its decisions in the coming years could shift global balance in ways many Americans might not yet fully grasp. Perched at the crossroads of Europe and the Middle East, Turkey controls the Bosporus Strait, a narrow but vital waterway that serves as the maritime gateway between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean. Should Turkey ever decide to restrict passage through this corridor, NATO's naval operations would face immediate, possibly catastrophic disruption. That's not a distant what-if. It's a realistic possibility rooted in Turkey's increasingly assertive foreign policy. As the Buddha once said, "What you think, you become. What you feel, you attract. What you imagine, you create." Turkey is clearly imagining itself not just as a regional power, but as a global one, and it's already acting accordingly. Turkey is home to Incirlik Air Base, a linchpin in America's ability to respond swiftly to conflicts across the Middle East. Lose that base, and the US loses a critical launch point for operations in regions already teetering on instability. But Turkey is no longer content playing a supporting role. Its recent arms deals with Russia, including the controversial purchase of the S-400 missile system, signal a willingness to step outside the Western consensus. It has negotiated directly with Iran, balanced its stance on the Ukraine-Russia war, and increasingly spoken with a voice distinct from NATO's unified front. This isn't mere diplomacy. This is a country exploring autonomy in global alignment. As the Zen master Shunryu Suzuki once said, "In the beginner's mind there are many possibilities, but in the experts there are few." Turkey is navigating those possibilities, sometimes to the unease of its Western allies. Adding to this complexity is Turkey's rapid emergence in the global defense industry. It is now a producer and exporter of military drones and defense technologies that are being adopted not only by smaller states, but even by US allies. These tools have already changed the face of modern warfare in conflicts like Nagorno-Karabakh and Ukraine, giving Turkey not just diplomatic weight but technological influence. If Turkey were to recalibrate its loyalties, it wouldn't just diminish US leverage. It could offer America's strategic rivals a powerful new partner with operational experience and hardware to match. Beyond the military dimension, Turkey is also an economic bridge between East and West. It links European markets with Asia, particularly through its energy corridors and trade routes in agriculture and technology. A sudden political realignment, whether toward China, Russia, or an independent bloc, could disrupt global supply chains and energy flow in ways that would hit consumers, businesses, and governments around the world. In an age when interdependence defines prosperity, such a pivot would not stay isolated. As Thich Nhat Hanh reminds us, when you plant lettuce, if it does not grow well, you don't blame the lettuce. You look for reasons it is not doing well. Likewise, understanding Turkey's shift requires that we examine the roots: neglected diplomacy, cultural friction, and competing national interests. What makes Turkey especially dangerous to underestimate is the quiet power it wields. Unlike headline-grabbing rivals, Turkey's influence is embedded in the fabric of the systems the US depends on: air bases, shipping routes, defense coordination, and trade. These aren't merely points of cooperation, they are lifelines. If Ankara decides to walk away or even just rebalance, the consequences for Washington would be immediate and far-reaching, militarily, economically, and diplomatically. And these scenarios aren't imaginary. They are already beginning to take shape, hinting at a future where the old alliances no longer offer the certainty they once did. In our own lives, this serves as a mirror. Sometimes we take certain relationships or arrangements for granted, assuming their stability, but just as a nation can shift alliances quietly over time, so too can people shift their priorities. The wise know that trust, like power, must be nurtured, not demanded. Be mindful of the forces in your life that seem quiet but carry weight. Turkey's story is a reminder that the most impactful changes often come not with a roar, but with a quiet redirection. What paths are quietly shifting beneath your own feet? And how are you preparing to respond? Number 2. The United Kingdom. When you think of the United Kingdom, maybe what first comes to mind is a warm cup of afternoon tea, the elegance of royal traditions, or that famously polished accent. But beneath that charm lies a country with deep strategic importance. If the UK ever decided to walk away from its alliance with the United States, the shockwaves would ripple across the globe in ways most people don't realize. Have you ever stopped to ask yourself what truly holds together global stability? Well, one of the strongest threads in that fabric is the UK-US partnership, and it runs deeper than many suspect. At the heart of this bond is the Five Eyes Alliance, a top-tier intelligence-sharing network where the UK provides America with real-time access to data on cyber threats, terrorist plots, and military activities around the world. Without this access, how would the US navigate global threats? Suddenly, the most powerful nation on Earth could find itself flying blind in moments when clarity is everything. But it doesn't stop at intelligence. London is one of the most powerful financial hubs in the world, second only to New York. Trillions of dollars pass through its institutions, and the City of London plays a major role in stabilizing the global economy. If the UK ever shifts its financial allegiance, perhaps leaning toward a competitor bloc or moving away from the US dollar, the ripple effect on Wall Street would be more than symbolic. It could cause a financial quake. So, what does this mean for everyday Americans? Your savings, your investments, and the price of goods could all be impacted by decisions made across the Atlantic. Have we grown too comfortable assuming that bond will never break? Now think about defense. Britain isn't just a partner, it's a force multiplier. It hosts US military personnel, shares nuclear capabilities, and conducts joint operations across the world. From submarine bases in Scotland to aircraft carriers deployed in contested seas, the UK gives America something incredibly rare: trusted boots on the ground in strategically vital locations. And in global diplomacy, few voices carry more weight than Britain's. Its role in NATO, the United Nations, and the G7 gives it the power to sway decisions, hold alliances together, and provide legitimacy to actions taken on the world stage. If that voice stopped harmonizing with Washington's tune, how long would the chorus of global unity last? Right now, the UK is redefining itself. Since Brexit, it's forging new trade deals, exploring fresh partnerships, and in many ways, choosing a more independent path. This could be a great opportunity, or a warning. If America doesn't make the effort to align with Britain's evolving strategy, it might find itself left behind by its closest and most capable ally. That's why it's important to remember, alliances are not static, they're living, breathing relationships that require understanding, trust, and continued effort. As the Buddha once said, "Do not dwell in the past, do not dream of the future, concentrate the mind on the present moment." That wisdom applies here. The past friendship between the US and UK is strong, but resting on history alone is risky. What matters now is how both nations act in the present, with awareness and respect. So ask yourself, what does it mean to be a true ally in your life, your work, your relationships? Just like countries, we often assume closeness is enough. But the lesson here is powerful. Proximity doesn't guarantee unity. If the UK walks away, America wouldn't just lose a longtime friend, it could lose a strategic cornerstone that underpins its intelligence, defense, diplomacy, and economic influence. In a world that's shifting fast, the strength of any bond, whether between people or nations, comes down to how well we nurture it when times change. Number 3. Brazil. Let me ask you something. What happens if the lungs of the earth stop breathing with us? What if a country so rich in natural resources, cultural pride, and growing global power decides to take a different path, one that no longer runs alongside the United States? That country is Brazil, and its choices could shape not just regional politics, but the entire planet's future. Brazil is more than just the largest country in South America. It's home to the Amazon rainforest, a natural wonder that helps regulate the global climate and produces a significant share of the oxygen we breathe. It also absorbs billions of tons of carbon dioxide, acting like a sponge for the damage done by industrial nations. Now think, what if Brazil decided to stop cooperating on environmental efforts? What if deforestation surged while climate agreements fell apart? Could our world, already on edge from rising temperatures, handle the blow? As the Buddha once said, our life is shaped by our mind, for we become what we think. With a pure mind, we can shape a pure world. But when global cooperation breaks down, even the purest intentions struggle to find footing. Now, take a deeper look beyond the trees and oxygen. Brazil is a critical player in global trade, exporting essentials like soybeans, beef, coffee, iron ore, and oil. These aren't luxuries, these are the lifeblood of industries across America, from your morning coffee to the fuel in your car and the food on your table. If Brazil were to disrupt trade, either through policy changes, economic realignment, or siding more with emerging power blocks like BRICS, the US economy could feel it immediately. Prices would jump, supply chains could freeze, and industries would scramble for alternatives. Brazil isn't just another trade partner, it's a cornerstone of global supply and demand. And the plot thickens. Brazil is sitting on massive, largely untapped reserves of rare earth minerals, the very elements that power smartphones, solar panels, and electric vehicles. In a world racing toward green technology, these resources are the new oil. So, what if Brazil chooses to sell these to US competitors or limits access altogether? Would America's clean energy future be delayed? Could its technological edge slip away? Let's also talk about influence. Brazil holds tremendous diplomatic weight in Latin America and often sets the tone for how the region responds to international issues. With its growing military capabilities and strong leadership voice, a shift in its alignment would create a vacuum, one that powers like China or Russia would gladly fill, right in America's own hemisphere. That's not just geopolitics, that's a strategic threat close to home. And here's the thing, Brazil isn't a follower. It's a proud, independent nation with its own vision for the future. That's why the US can't just expect loyalty. It has to earn it, respect it, and nurture it. As the great statesman Winston Churchill once said, there is only one thing worse than fighting with allies, and that is fighting without them. If Brazil walks away, it won't be with anger or hostility. It will be with quiet purpose, and the US will feel the consequences everywhere, in rising prices, in weakened diplomacy, and in lost opportunity. So let me ask you again, are we paying enough attention to the partnerships that matter most? Are we listening, adapting, and showing respect to nations that don't always move to our rhythm, but still help hold the world together? Because if Brazil chooses its own rhythm and walks away, it won't just be a loss of a friend. It could be the unraveling of systems we depend on every day. In your own life, think about the relationships you've relied on, the ones that support your growth, your peace, and your goals. How are you showing up for them? Like with nations, trust must be mutual, and strength comes from understanding, not assumption. You're watching a breakdown of global power moves that could tip the balance and shake the foundations of the US economy. Type power shift in the comments if you're ready to see the truth most people ignore. The most eye-opening details are still ahead. Stay with us to see how it all unfolds. Number 4. South Korea. Think for a moment about the device in your hand, the sleek smartphone you use to text, work, shop, and connect with the world. How much of that power comes from South Korea? The truth is, far more than most people realize. This small but mighty nation is at the heart of modern American life, powering everything from your phone's memory to your car's onboard computer. South Korean tech giants like Samsung and SK Hynix dominate over 60% of the global memory chip market. And that's no small detail, because if either of these companies cut off supply, entire industries could grind to a halt overnight. We're not just talking about delays in phone launches, we're talking about a ripple effect that would hit smartphones, smart TVs, laptops, electric vehicles, medical equipment, and even defense systems. Can you imagine a modern economy running without memory chips? It's not just inconvenient, it's dangerous. And that's why this alliance goes far beyond commerce. South Korea is also one of America's closest military partners, hosting nearly 28,000 US troops on the front lines of one of the most unpredictable regions on Earth. Situated just across the border from North Korea, South Korea provides the US with a strategic launchpad and early warning position in Northeast Asia. If this relationship were to fracture, the US wouldn't just lose a friend, it would lose one of its strongest security anchors in a region where tensions can escalate in hours, not weeks. But what's remarkable is that South Korea's impact isn't limited to defense and technology. It's also reshaping global culture in ways no one predicted a decade ago. From the worldwide explosion of K-pop and Korean dramas to the influence of Korean fashion, digital art and beauty trends, South Korea has become a cultural superpower. This soft power influences millions of hearts and minds, especially among younger generations who feel more connected to Korean culture than perhaps any other. And soft power matters because it builds emotional loyalty and shapes public opinion globally, far beyond what traditional diplomacy can achieve. Yet, as all this unfolds, South Korea is quietly preparing for a future where it leads, not follows. It's pouring resources into artificial intelligence, space exploration, quantum computing, and green energy. It's forming new partnerships and trade routes that don't always involve the US, and that should raise a very important question for us all. Are we nurturing this alliance, or simply assuming it will always be there? Because history shows that even the strongest partnerships can fade if not respected and renewed. As the Buddha once said, nothing is permanent, everything is subject to change. Being is always becoming, and that reminds us that relationships, even between nations, must evolve to stay alive. So, the next time you unlock your phone, stream a Korean drama, or rely on the precision of your car's tech, pause and reflect on where that brilliance originates, and ask yourself what happens if South Korea decides to walk a different path. This is about more than technology or military bases. It's about trust, cooperation, and the kind of future we build together or lose apart. In your own life too, ask, what partnerships are you relying on without giving them the care they deserve? Because whether in foreign policy or personal connection, strength only lasts as long as mutual effort. And if South Korea were to drift away, we wouldn't just lose a tech partner, we'd lose a visionary force, shaping the future itself. Number 5. Japan. Let's take a closer look at a country smaller than California, yet with an influence so massive that if it ever stepped away from its partnership with the United States, it could set American progress back by decades. That country is Japan. Now, you might first think of Japan for its culture. Sushi, anime, cherry blossoms. But behind that beauty is a powerhouse of precision, discipline, and unmatched technological advancement. Japan isn't just a trade partner. It's one of the key engines driving global innovation. With over 100 Fortune Global 500 companies and cutting-edge leadership in robotics, automotive tech, and microchip manufacturing, Japan is responsible for producing more than 30% of the world's semiconductor materials. Think about that for a moment. What would happen to your smartphone, electric vehicle, or even medical devices if that pipeline were interrupted? Can the US, or any country for that matter, afford to lose such a vital source of technological backbone? The answer is a resounding no. And as the Buddha once said, to understand everything is to forgive everything, which in today's context reminds us that understanding Japan's true value means realizing how deeply its presence supports modern life as we know it. But there's more. Japan also plays a critical role in global security, especially in the Indo-Pacific, where tension between global powers continues to rise. With nearly 54,000 US troops stationed on Japanese soil, the nation is not just a peaceful ally, it's a frontline shield. If this strategic alliance were to weaken or break, the power balance across Asia could shift rapidly, and not in America's favor. Would the US be able to respond as quickly to threats in the region without Japan's cooperation? Could it afford to stretch its military resources even thinner? And while Japan doesn't often make headlines with bold political moves, don't let that calm demeanor fool you. It's the third largest economy in the world, and every decision it makes affects not only Wall Street but also global confidence in trade, currency stability, and technological collaboration. What's especially worth noting is that Japan is forging ahead with investments in artificial intelligence, renewable energy, and next-generation manufacturing, areas that are crucial for America's own future growth. If Japan ever chose to follow a more independent route, whether due to domestic pressures or frustration over defense burdens, that shift could leave the US scrambling to fill a gap no other nation can easily replace. This isn't just about honoring old treaties or long-standing friendships. It's about staying relevant in a world where innovation and cooperation are the real currency of power. So I'll ask you directly, are we, as individuals and as a nation, doing enough to value and invest in our strongest relationships? Do we understand that losing Japan as a close ally wouldn't just hurt diplomatically, it could stall our future? Because, just like in our personal lives, the strongest bonds aren't the ones we take for granted, but the ones we protect, nourish, and evolve with. The lesson here is clear. Success in the future depends on the alliances we honor today. Whether it's in your relationships, your business, or on the world stage, loyalty and collaboration aren't luxuries, they are necessities. When we overlook the quiet strength of a partner like Japan, we risk losing something far greater than convenience. We risk losing momentum, vision, and a shared future built on trust. Number 6. Germany. Let me ask you something. What happens when one of the world's most disciplined, economically powerful nations quietly changes course? Not with loud threats or dramatic headlines, but with policy shifts, economic influence, and strategic decisions. That's the kind of impact Germany has, and if you're underestimating it, you're missing one of the most vital pieces of America's global stability. Germany, sitting in the heart of Europe without oil reserves or nuclear warheads, holds immense power not because of its military might, but because of its unmatched precision, economic strength, and political weight. It's the largest economy in Europe and the third largest exporter in the world, producing the high-end machinery, automobiles, chemicals, and technologies that fuel industries across the globe. Think about how many products you interact with daily. Odds are, somewhere in that supply chain, German engineering played a role. But there's more. Germany is the economic core of the European Union, and the US is responsible for over $1 trillion in trade with the US each year. So what would happen if Germany decided to pivot, shifting the EU's direction toward rising global powers like China, or strengthening ties with Russia or BRICS nations? Could the US economy absorb that shock, or would our industries, investments, and influence start to feel the strain? And it doesn't stop at economics. Germany is home to Ramstein Air Base, a critical nerve center for US military operations across Europe, Africa, and the Middle East. Without access to Ramstein, the United States would lose a major launch point for everything from humanitarian aid to defense responses in volatile zones. How would America respond to a crisis in the Middle East without the logistical power of Ramstein? Could we react fast enough or effectively enough without it? But even beyond defense, Germany is already shaping the future in areas that will define the next era of global leadership. They are at the forefront of AI research, digital sovereignty, and the green energy transition, investing billions into sustainable infrastructure and innovation. If the US lags behind or fails to align with Germany's vision, it could find itself sidelined from the next wave of industrial revolution. Are we ready to play catch-up in a race we once led? Germany doesn't need to raise its voice to shift global tides. It simply makes decisions, and the world adjusts. That's the kind of quiet leverage it holds. And if trade tensions grow or political priorities drift further apart, it won't take a single weapon to disrupt the relationship. Just a few trade regulations, policy adjustments, or technology standards that don't include the US. That kind of silent separation would send shockwaves through American factories, tech firms, and global planning tables. So, what's the lesson here? Strong relationships require more than shared history. They demand ongoing respect, cooperation, and mutual growth. As the Buddha wisely said, a jug fills drop by drop, and so does trust between nations. Germany is not just a friend, it's a foundation. And if that foundation weakens, the cracks will show everywhere. In our personal lives too, we often rely on stable forces that don't make noise. But their absence would change everything. Are we paying attention to what holds our world together? Because when a country like Germany walks away, it doesn't slam the door. It simply closes it quietly, and by the time we notice, it may already be locked. If this video has opened your eyes, you're already ahead of 99% of people who aren't paying attention. Drop "Wake Up 2025" in the comments if you're ready to think beyond borders. What comes next may challenge what you thought you knew, so don't look away now. Number 7. India. Now let me ask you this. What happens when the world's largest democracy, with a population of over 1.44 billion people, starts leaning away from the United States? That country is India. And while it might not always dominate the headlines, it's quietly becoming one of the most influential forces shaping the global future. Geographically, India sits at a strategic crossroads in Asia, and economically it's one of the fastest growing major economies on Earth, with projections that could soon place it among the top 3 globally. Militarily, India's defense budget is already in the world's top 5, and its commitment to modernization is turning it into a regional power the world must respect. But beyond the numbers, there's something even more critical. India is the beating heart of the global tech workforce. Nearly 75% of all IT outsourcing flows through Indian firms, meaning that whether you're using a banking app, troubleshooting with customer support, updating your phone, or protecting your data through cybersecurity networks, there's a high chance someone in India is behind the scenes making it all work. So let me ask you, what would happen if that support stopped overnight? How long would your company's systems stay secure? How would major corporations, startups, and even federal agencies function without the Indian tech engine running in the background? But it's not just about tech. India's value as a US partner also comes from its ability to act as a stabilizing counterweight to rising global powers like China. When India and the US collaborate on defense, trade, energy, or diplomacy, it helps maintain a balance in Asia that keeps conflict in check and creates space for democratic values to grow. Yet here's the challenge. India doesn't take orders, and it doesn't tie itself permanently to any one ally. It's building its own future, investing heavily in renewable energy, semiconductor manufacturing, and even space exploration. And with countries like Russia, China, and the Gulf states vying for India's attention, How long do you think America can stay at the top of India's priority list without putting in the effort? Relationships, especially international ones, don't sustain themselves on old promises. They demand respect, renewal, and strategic alignment. If the US takes this partnership for granted, it risks losing access to one of the most important economic and geopolitical engines of the next century. As the Buddha once said, in the end, only three things matter: how much you loved, how gently you lived, and how gracefully you let go of things not meant for you. The question is, will the US love this alliance enough to nurture it, or watch it fade away through neglect? Because if India ever walks away, the fallout won't just be in lost code and delayed software updates. It'll be felt across defense strategy, global diplomacy, trade routes, and the future of technological leadership itself. So, how are we preparing today to protect the partnerships that will define tomorrow? Number 8. Saudi Arabia. Let's talk about something you feel every day, whether you're filling up your gas tank, paying your heating bill, or watching food prices rise. And ask yourself, who really controls the flow of energy that powers our lives? More often than not, the answer leads back to one country: Saudi Arabia. Now, you might not see them front and center in the daily headlines, but make no mistake, this desert kingdom plays one of the most powerful behind-the-scenes roles in shaping not only the global oil market, but also America's economic stability. Saudi Arabia controls nearly 17% of the world's proven oil reserves, and their decisions, whether to boost or cut production, can instantly send global oil prices soaring or crashing. We've seen it happen before, and if history teaches us anything, it's that it can happen again. That power doesn't come from an army or a fleet. It comes from the oil beneath their feet and the influence they wield through it. And here's the thing: the long-standing arrangement between the US and Saudi Arabia, oil in exchange for security, isn't set in stone. It's been evolving. In recent years, Saudi Arabia has started building tighter relationships with rising powers like China and Russia, and more importantly, they've begun trading oil in currencies other than the US dollar. That might sound like a minor shift, but in reality it could rattle the core of America's financial strength. Have you ever wondered why the dollar holds so much global weight? A huge part of that confidence comes from the fact that oil is almost always traded in dollars. If that link breaks, if more nations follow Saudi Arabia's lead and turn to other currencies, it could seriously weaken the dollar's dominance, making everything from imports to travel more expensive for everyday Americans. But the stakes go even deeper than money. Saudi Arabia is also a key player in Middle Eastern politics, Islamic diplomacy, and regional military balance. Their decisions influence everything from counter-terrorism efforts to peace talks and arms deals. So what happens if they start turning their back on Washington and begin signing defense agreements with US rivals, or stop sharing intelligence on extremist threats? These aren't wild theories. These are real possibilities already being discussed behind closed doors. The question is, are we paying attention? Are we adapting fast enough to maintain trust and cooperation with a partner whose global role is shifting? As the Buddha taught, just as a candle cannot burn without fire, men cannot live without a spiritual life. The same applies to nations. Alliances, like a flame, must be fueled with care, attention, and mutual respect, or they slowly flicker out. So the next time you turn on the heat, swipe your card at the pump, or watch oil prices swing with a headline, ask yourself, What if Saudi Arabia stops playing by America's rules? What if they walk away, not with hostility, but simply with new priorities? The result wouldn't just be higher gas prices. It would reshape markets, tilt alliances, and force the US to rethink its place in a world that no longer revolves around its energy dominance. And that's the lesson here. Power today doesn't always shout. It often whispers from boardrooms, energy summits, and silent shifts in currency. So, how prepared are we for a world where old agreements fade and new alliances form? The real question is not just whether Saudi Arabia will stay close, but whether the US can remain the kind of partner worth staying close to. Number 9. Russia. Let's talk about a country that has the power to shake the world economy with just one decision: Russia. Now, you might already know that Russia is the world's second largest oil exporter, producing nearly 10% of all crude oil on the planet. But have you truly considered what that means for your everyday life? What would happen if Russia suddenly slashed its oil exports or redirected its energy flow toward countries that don't align with US interests? Think gas prices are high now. One strategic move from Moscow and you could wake up to prices tripling overnight. Not because of a storm in Texas or a refinery fire, but because a single phone call was made from the Kremlin. But Russia's influence doesn't stop at oil. It's also one of the biggest players in natural gas, wheat exports, and rare earth metals. All essential resources that power homes, feed nations, and build the technology you're probably using right now. So let me ask you, how vulnerable is the US if a single country controls so many of the raw materials we rely on daily? Russia's true power isn't only military, though it does possess the largest nuclear arsenal in the world. Its influence comes from its ability to disrupt global stability through diplomacy, economic leverage, and regional partnerships. Whether it's negotiating energy deals with Europe, partnering with China, or fueling conflicts in strategic zones, Russia has mastered the art of moving global chess pieces without firing a single shot. And here's where it gets even more critical. Russia also plays a major role in joint space missions, cybersecurity cooperation, and strategic arms agreements. What happens if they pull out of these agreements altogether, or worse, start working directly with nations that stand in opposition to US goals? Suddenly, America could lose critical advantages in everything from satellite systems to digital infrastructure. These aren't distant hypotheticals, they're scenarios already unfolding as the global order shifts. Russia is already pivoting eastward, strengthening ties with China, Iran, and other nations in the BRICS alliance, slowly but steadily reshaping the global power balance. So, what's the lesson here? When we talk about national security and economic stability, we often focus on visible threats, but some of the most dangerous shifts happen quietly, through trade routes, currency deals, or diplomatic withdrawals. If we imagine the world without foresight, without nurturing vital alliances, or preparing for the consequences of fractured partnerships, we create vulnerability. Russia doesn't have to send tanks to your border to hurt your economy. It just needs to adjust its strategy. So how do we as a nation and as individuals respond to that kind of influence? Are we strengthening the right alliances, diversifying our supply chains, and preparing for a world where traditional power structures are being rewritten? These are the real questions we need to be asking, because the cost of ignoring them won't just show up in foreign policy meetings. It'll show up in your gas tank, your grocery bill, and your job market. Number 10. China. Think about your daily routine, your smartphone, your laptop, the batteries that power your gadgets, even the clothes you wear or the toys your children play with. Now ask yourself this: what would happen if all of that stopped showing up on store shelves? Most people don't realize just how deeply tied their everyday comfort and convenience is to one single country, China. This nation produces more than 28% of the world's total manufacturing output, which is more than the United States, Japan, and Germany combined. China isn't just a trade partner, it's the global factory floor. From iPhones and televisions to solar panels, furniture and kitchen appliances, China is the engine humming behind what we often take for granted. But that's just scratching the surface. China also holds over $800 billion in US Treasury securities, which makes it not only one of our biggest lenders, but also a country with considerable economic leverage over America's financial stability. So what happens if tensions escalate and China decides to play hardball, maybe by cutting exports, manipulating supply chains, or even threatening to dump US debt? This isn't just a hypothetical scenario, it's a very real risk that could send shockwaves through our economy. We're talking about rising inflation, stalled industries, panic in the markets, and empty shelves at major retailers. And while the goods we receive may be the most visible part of the relationship, the deeper issue is control. The US has, over the years, become increasingly dependent on Chinese manufacturing, labor, and rare earth materials, essential to everything from smartphones to electric vehicles and even defense equipment. If that thread gets cut, the damage won't be contained to just tech or retail. It'll reach into healthcare, energy, transportation, and more. Entire sectors would struggle to function, and everyday Americans would feel the impact in their wallets, workplaces, and even access to basic products. What's even more concerning is that China is rapidly advancing in areas like artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and green energy, technologies that will define the next era of global power. So if the US falls behind or finds itself locked out of cooperation, what kind of future are we building? Are we investing enough in our own manufacturing capabilities, education systems, and innovation to withstand a world where China pulls away? Or are we simply hoping the status quo will hold? And there you have it, 10 powerful nations whose quiet decisions could reshape America's future in 2025 and beyond. These aren't distant hypotheticals. They're real, unfolding dynamics that demand attention, respect, and reflection. At the Journey of Wisdom, we believe understanding the world begins with understanding our connections between countries, communities, and even within ourselves. If today's video opened your eyes to the deeper forces at play, help us spread that awareness. Please like this video, share it with others who care about where the world is heading, and don't forget to subscribe to the Journey of Wisdom and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming explorations into the truths shaping our lives. Until next time, stay aware, stay curious, and walk wisely.